So here we are at the end of July and the very start of August, and I thought today we'd have a look at catalpas, or the Indian bean tree, as this rather lovely tree behind me is called. You might think that it has something to do with India, but no, this is an American tree, and it's the American Indians who called it the bean tree. And if we look at the flowers, which we don't often get the chance to see down at ground level because the tree is usually flowering rather higher up, but you can see each flowering stem appears right at the end of the twig, and that the individual flowers don't all come out at once, and they have this wonderful sort of frilly edge and a yellowy orange centre with a bit of purple around and about, designed to attract a bumblebee or a wasp. And as I'm holding this, I can see a large bumblebee trying to make its entry into these flowers. And when we look further, we see that they all face different ways in the flowering truss, so that they can attract insects passing by from different directions. And if we look up into the tree itself, you'll see that actually we're covered in flowers, although we can't see them anything like as well as the ones we just looked at in our hands. What we can see are the bean, as in bean tree. And if we look closely, you can see the long seed pods that appear when the flowers are finished. And those are last year's seed pods we're looking at, and there are some more over there. And they do look like rather thin but long runner beans, or haricot beans if you like. Quite extraordinary when you think about it, that a flower that is shaped as those we're looking at then turns into something that looks like a runner bean as a seed. But there we are. Catalpas like to be grown in full sun. They like it hot and dry. This particular tree used to grow in some moors and was transplanted when my grandmother finally died and brought back to Caerhays. The problem with catalpas is that with these gigantic leaves, they are prone to losing odd branches in storms. And if you look at the trunk of our tree here, you see that quite a few bits have fallen off, broken off, snapped off and collapsed over the years, and probably we've grown it in slightly too windy a location. It's perfectly hardy tree, but it will snap off unless it's in quite a sheltered position. But anyway, we'll now go and have a look at one or two variations and different species of catalpa and see how the flowers are a little bit different. So this is Catalpa erubescens, and this is a cross between the Indian bean tree Catalpa bignonioides and a Chinese catalpa called Catalpa ovata. And so it's effectively a cross between two species, so it's times erubescens. And you could be forgiven for thinking the flower looks very similar indeed to Catalpa bignonioides, and I think the real difference is in the flowering shoot has smaller flowers and rather more numerous flowers. The colour scheme it has a little bit more purple in it perhaps, and the yellow is a little bit stronger, but I think that the distinguishing characteristic is probably the size of the flower and the quantity of the flowers. And again, we're lucky to find a catalpa with a flower that we can get close enough to look at how intricate and beautiful the individual flowers are. The leaves are less ovate than they are in the true Indian bean tree. But if we look at the trunk of this tree, again we can see that huge bits of it have split out over the years, and the tree is trying to heal itself. In fact, I think I made a video a year or two ago explaining how catalpas do split out, but there we go. It's an interesting tree, and in a second we're going to have a look at another variation of Catalpa erubescens. So we were looking at Catalpa erubescens, and this is Catalpa erubescens purpurea, and the purple only shows itself really in the new growth that appears in the spring. But since we've now had a lot of lovely rain, we've got some secondary new growth, and you can see the purple stems to the leaves and the purple new growth, which would have been much more pronounced in the spring than it is now. And gradually the purple fades off everything but the stems of the leaves, and eventually that too changes. So that's the distinguishing characteristic of the purple leaf form. The flowers are much the same, and we're looking at a catalpa now that's been in the ground about 7 or 8 years. It still hasn't quite achieved flowering size, but I think it very soon will after the 2 hot summers that we've just had. And this is another species of catalpa. This is Catalpa speciosa, or the western catalpa, and it comes from the central United States. And this is a form of Catalpa speciosa called Pulverulenta, and it has this sort of rather attractive mottled variegated leaf form. You may or may not like that, but it's a bit different and unusual. Catalpa speciosa is much slower growing than the other catalpas we've looked at today, and this tree is about 10 years old, considerably smaller than the erubescens which we just looked at, although it's been in the ground for the same amount of time, and again not yet old enough to put up flowers, but the flowers are not appreciably different. So we've been through and looked at the collection of catalpas here at Caerhays, but there is one catalpa that has flowered about 6 or 8 weeks ago, and that is Catalpa Duclouxii, a catalpa that's had its name changed several times, and we always called it Catalpa Duclouxii, but now it's Catalpa Duclouxii Group. And in a way, what we're going to do is attach a really nice picture of the flower of Catalpa Duclouxii to the end of this video, because you'll see that, and I suspect you'll agree with me, that of all the catalpas, Duclouxii has the most interesting flower. It's the most gorgeous pink. It's a large stem of flowers, and the most intricate bee-like colorations within each particular flower. So that's what you'll see at the end of this little video on catalpas. Thanks a lot.